Okay, so let's just follow straight on. This is part B of the lecture 6 or tutorial 6. We've just seen how to make scatter plots using base R. What I want to do now is just jump on and show you how to do pretty much exactly the same thing using this other additional package called ggplot. Actually, the package is called ggplot2. The functions are called ggplot. So you'll have to go and install that if you haven't already got it. The most common way to do that, there's a whole bunch of additional scripts. Pretty much almost a completely different way of working with R, which is it's been called the tidyverse. It's been written by a guy called Hadley Wickham and many other people. It's an amazing collection of packages for manipulating data, tidying up data. It uses quite a different grammar structure than the base R. So some people love it and dive straight in on that. Other people teach base, as I'm going to do here, and I'm going to stick with that for the next while. But I'm really converting to ggplot very quickly. But it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, you can still make really nice plots in base R, and you can make very nice plots in ggplot as well. I suppose just really the big advantage for tidyverse is when you start working with ever bigger data sets, and when you have loads and loads of data, huge numbers of columns, many thousands of rows, loads of different groups, then tidyverse comes into its own. So what I suggest you do is, anyway, you can go grab it anyhow, and you can play it at your leisure. Go grab the tidyverse collection of packages. That'll install a whole bunch of things, including ggplot and tidyr and Magritte and all these other ones as well. So if you go and grab that, then we'll look at the way in which ggplot works. So I've sort of typed out, Alan and I have typed out a bunch of sort of explanatory notes here. I'm actually just going to dive straight in a little bit further down here to start with. So we're going to work with this iris data set again. This is a graph we made in base R. We're going to try, well, we're not going to do exactly the same, but I'll show you something similar in ggplot. So we're going to load up the ggplot library. You could load the tidyverse, the entire tidyverse library if you wanted. We actually don't need any of the other ones really. We just need the ggplot. So we'll do that there. So library ggplot2. Remember the library is called ggplot2. The function is ggplot. So what we're going to do then is we're going to make a basic plot using the ggplot function. And ggplot takes just two things really at its core. It takes the data, so we need to tell it what the data set is. So typically that's a data frame, or in the tidyverse world you might end up with things called tibbles, which are slight variations on the data frame theme. But we'll end up with a data set, so we're going to pass it the iris data set so it knows where to find the information. And then we need to specify, after that we need to specify a mapping. So this is the aesthetic mapping. So the mapping equals AES stands for aesthetic. So this is the aesthetic that links the data here to elements of the plotting. So the x-axis, the x direction is going to be represented by the petal width. The y direction here is going to be represented by the petal length, just as we had over here on our base plot. So with that, we're pretty much ready to go. Now, the point is that that on its own will just produce a blank plot. So I can run that little chunk of code there, just that bit there. If I run that just blank bit of code, we end up with just a blank plot. So that's sort of the blank aesthetic, the background, as it will, on which we're going to paint on our canvas. And it basically is a canvas, because the way ggplot then works is it adds up successive layers of different elements on top of that are actually our plotting elements, and then you can modify the contents of those elements later on, which we'll see in a moment. So rather than just creating plots like that, what I tend to do is push the contents of that plot into an object, and I usually call it P. So I use M for my models, M1, M2, M3, and P1, P2, P3 for my plots. You might want to be a bit more verbose, depending on how many of them you're producing in a script, just so you know exactly what you're plotting. So here we've got, so I've got that ggplot object, that sort of the basic structure, this background that we made over here down in our plotting panel. So that's specified there and is going to get saved into this object P1. But on it, we're going to add on to that. So that's what this plus is here. So we've created this, and we're going to add on to that basic layer. We're going to add on what's called a geom, so a geometry. This geom is a geom point, so we're going to add points on. There's geom point, there's geom line, there's geom bar, there's geom lots of things. But we're going to go for a geom point, which is going to add the scatterplot points on, and it will inherit the mapping. So it will inherit. So what's nice about ggplot is whatever comes first on the basics, whatever you specify basically first in the sequence, the rest of the things will inherit it. So if I even just add a geom point, so I can even take that out of there for now, actually. That's what I'll do. I'll take that out of there for now, and we'll show you what this does. So we take ggplot, that's our basic plot that we want to specify, and then we just want to add a geom point on top of it. So we can run that nothing will happen because we need to actually force it to print the plot. We need to print P1 now. So we come down over here to the bottom right corner again. We've got exactly what we had in the first time we ran with base plot as well. We've got a really simple plot which has got petal.width on the x-axis, petal.length on the y-axis, and the points have been added now on top. So the points have just been added as a basic, just black dots, and they've inherited their aesthetic from the aesthetic that was defined up here in the ggplot when we first made that plot up there. So that's a really basic graph. You'll see already the difference. ggplot by default will tend to make these light grey backgrounds with these white wire mesh in the back, with the sort of thicker white lines that the major axis ticks and these thinner white lines that the minor axis ticks. Some people love that, some people hate it. Journals typically at the moment hate it. That's because they like to have to print stuff, and when you print stuff you're wasting ink if you're doing that, and also it causes probably, it doesn't look as good in print. But actually I find, well, my view is I think they look great. They look great on websites, they look great on blog posts, they look great in sort of documents you want to share with people if you're reading it off a screen because you can see it in color and all the rest. But I do agree that if you're going to print stuff still onto paper and in journals still, it doesn't look the best. At least that's my view at the minute. So in any case, we can get rid of that. So I told you we can do anything we want with ggplot. So we're going to come down now and actually make a better plot. So we're going to specify a new plot, P2. It's exactly the same actually. So it's got exactly the same ggplot data mapping. So it's got the data as iris again. The mapping is the aesthetic of x is petal width again, y is petal length. And then we're going to add on to it a geom point again, but now we're going to embellish the mapping a little bit. So it's going to keep that, it's going to inherit this basic mapping from up here, but we're going to embellish it by saying, well, the additional aesthetics we want on top is to specify that I'd like to color it by the column of species. So if you remember, we've got 3 different species here, Setosa, versicolor, and virginica. So we're going to ask it to add another aesthetic, which is to map the color, to map the species onto the color of the data points. And we'd also like to change the shape of the data points, the geom points, and change that shape according to the column of data specified by species. So that should give us different colors for the species and also different shapes for points for those species. We can add another layer of information on as well. So we can add another thing called the geom smooth. So another geometry is, and the geom smooth is going to be a smooth line through the data. It's not a regression line. Although you can actually fit a straight regression line with geom smooth. There's an option in there to do it. We might try to do that in a moment actually. And what we can then do, so we're adding these on. You'll see here we're adding them on again with these plus symbols. So we're creating the basic plot there, and we're adding onto it a geom point. We're adding onto that on top again a geom smooth. Then we're going to add a GG title. I'm going to leave a blank title actually, but you could put in whatever you wanted. Let's just put something in actually. I'm just going to write my figure title just to show you what it does. Often for papers and publications we don't have titles on graphs at all, is the usual thing. We just have the figure legend underneath. But things change, and particularly when you want to be doing stuff, if you want to be putting graphs up online on blog posts or something, you might want to have this on. And what we're going to do now is we're going to change the theme a little bit. So we're going to modify the theme. So the theme comes with basic, the theme comes with whatever the basic theme is. I can't remember what the basic default theme is, but it comes with settings for the font sizes, etc. Here, so the size of the text, the size of the fonts, the direction, etc. We want to change those. So we're going to modify the theme. So we're going to say plus theme, and it's going to inherit all the other theme settings. It'll inherit from whatever is default, but these then we're going to modify. So we're going to say the plot.title gets a horizontal adjust. So we're going to horizontally justify it with 0.5. Can't quite remember what that does actually. So let's check. So it takes an element text. So the plot title gets an element text. Element text is a ggplot function again. So anything with text or labels or to do with it needs to get an element text to create it. So I'm just going to type elements text just horizontal justification in 0 to 1. So it's probably just going to move it to the left, I guess, a little bit. It's going to horizontally justify it and move it to the left rather than center, or maybe it'll put it in the center actually. I guess that might be right in the middle of the plot. Hopefully, we'll see in a moment. We're going to change the axis text. We're going to change its size. So the axis text is going to have a size of 12, and the axis title. So the axis text is the text, the tick mark text. The axis title is the label here, the petal.length label. That's going to be increased in size to 14, and it's going to get boldface. So it's going to get bold face font, so it's going to stand out a bit stronger for us. And we're going to specify manually the labels as well. So the labels are going to be, the labs are going to be X, the X label is going to be petal width in centimeters, and the Y label is going to be petal length in centimeters also. And then we're going to print it to screen again. So let's just grab all that and run it. So over here we can see, just up here actually, it's told us that geom smooth is used in method equals low s. We could have changed that, I'm guessing, to method equals regression or method equals something. I'll have a look at that in a moment for you. But what you can see it's done is it's plotted again the petal length against petal width data. It's now colored the information, it's colored the points according to which species they are. So this red color has been assigned to Setosa, green to versicolor, blue to virginica. Again, you might want to change those, the color palette, the color mapping, because red and green is generally not a good idea. We can find out how to change that in a minute as well. Then on top we've added this smooth line, this geom smooth line here, like this. So it's shown us what the basic line is through the data, it's just like a smoother line, and it's put the sort of estimate of error around it as well. As I said, I think you can do the geom, you can change geom smooth. So we've got geom smooth, we've got stat equals smooth, we've got method equals, e.g. you could change it to use LM or GLM or GAM, so you could check, it defaults to low s, so it's used low s at the minute, but if you put in LM there, you get a linear regression, just like we did before as well, and I'll leave you to play with that one actually. So something else that's very handy with ggplot is you can use this ggsave function. So ggsave will save out our plot into whatever we want. So it'll save it here into a file name. Here I've called it petalplot2.tiff, and we'll tell we want what we want to save. Well, we want to save the P2 object plot that we created. We want a device. We want to create a TIFF file. You can use JPEGs. You can use PDF, EPS, etc. The DPI, that's the dots per inch. That's the resolution of it. 300 is pretty high. Anything less than that, and you're going to see blurry. It'll be blurred in parts, and the compression is an option, so you can compress the file to make it smaller. You can get some problems if you use compression. You can have some problems opening the file on different computers or different operating systems. So sometimes it's best to leave compression as none. But the flip side to that is you can end up with a large file size. So if you're sharing files, they can end up huge, especially with TIFFs. So that's that. That's how we can make that. That's how we can make that plot. We can do even more then as well. So I said this is not very good maybe for publishing. So what you can start to do now is we can modify that again. So let's change the theme a little bit more. This is one of the really neat features. You'll see where what I've done is I haven't typed out the whole plotting commands again. We've already made a nice plot. I'm happy with that plot by and large. I just want to change a few elements of that. So what we can do now is we can say, well, P3, the new plot, P3 is P2 plot. So that inherits all of this content here. So we've already got this thing called P2 created up here. So P3 is P2, but then let's change the scale shape manual. So we're going to change the scale shape manual. So we're going to change the points that it's going to use. So instead of using 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're going to use point shapes 4, 5, and 6. We could do something similar with the color. Do something with the color, with scale colors, discrete. So actually it's scale color manual we want to use, so you can create your own manual scale here. So we can see here down in the example files, let's see how we do this. Now values equals cols or colors, so they've specified that here. Scale color manual values plus scale color, there it is, scale color manual. And you'll see you can use either COLOR or COLUR. It's common throughout R actually. They've managed to code it both ways for depending which side of the water you're on. So what we're going to do, let's change our colors and do something a bit different. So scale color manual, we're just ripping this from here basically. That's kind of what it's defaulting to. So scale color manual values equals C. Let's go for black, red, and blue. Okay, so we've specified manually the scale shape. manual, the scale, shape, color. There are loads of other options that you can set to default. There's loads of others you can get into. You can see there was scale, color, shape, discrete, scale, color, shape. Well, the scale, color, discrete, and continuous. And there's tons and tons in there in the background for you to play around with. And you'll find them in those recipes that I linked to up above. So that's what we're going to do. So we've got, so everything's the same as, so P3 is the same as P2, but we've changed the shapes from 1, 2, 3 to 4, 5, 6. We've changed the colors to black, red, and blue. We've gone for theme classic. Okay, so basically there's a whole bunch of presets built into some different themes. Instead of using the theme, the default theme, we're going to use theme classic. So that's going to strip out all those sort of grayish background to the plot that we saw earlier. And then we're going to change other elements of the theme. We're going to adjust we're going to set the plot title again, the axis text size, the axis title size again, the axis tick length. We're going to move them. Okay, so instead of it being plus 0.25, which pushes them out the way, so positive values push them out the way, negative values are going to push them in the way, so it's going to push those ticks in. Then as a consequence of that, and I only discovered this by Googling it, you'll see here, you follow the link here, you can just Google it. I only found this by Googling how to do it. If you push those in this way, without changing anything else, you'll find that these labels, this 4 ends up inside the graph plot point, which is what we don't want. So instead what we have to do then is we have to move the margin of that, we have to move the margins of these out, we have to manually specify these margins so they sit in the right place, and we do that with code I just grabbed off online. So the axis.textx is element text, and its margin is a unit, and the margins are a rectangular box in centimeters specified, and this bit of code here is what pushes those labels back outside of the plot. So we can run all that again and then print it as before. And that has clearly done nothing. And that's done nothing because because what I've done is I've forgotten to add this plus on the end of this. And that was a bit silly. So you need a plus on the end of all of this. So the P3 is P2 plus plus plus. So we're all okay there. So let's go again. Now we've got it. So now we've got our plot with a figure title up here. Again, you might not want to use that at all. We've got our plot points now in black, red, and blue. We've got them in the different point type shapes, the 4, 5, and 6 style. We've got our ticks coming in the way into the plot. We've got these sitting outside where we want them. There's a legend has been created here. Again, you can access the contents of that as a theme as well, and you can change the font sizes there and the scaling factors of all that as well if you want, or you could move it, you could place it wherever you want in the plot also with a bit of extra code. And again, you can save that out with gg save. So actually the only thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change this again. I'm going to change it so that instead of the geom smooth method LOS, let's put a linear regression on it so it's more like what we did above. I'm going to pop that in there. Remember to put my plus on the end this time. Go for method equals lm just like we used up above. Let's run that. Okay, so it's actually done both now, so that's not what we wanted. So in fact what we'd have to do is we wouldn't be able to we can't just inherit P3 from P2, so if we were to do that we'd have to do it all again actually, which I'm not going to do, so I'll let you play with that in your own time. That one didn't work too well. So what's happened there is it's inherited the P2 plot from up here with the geom smooth on it, and it's just added another geom smooth on top of it. It hasn't replaced the geom smooth that was there, which actually, when you think about it, makes sense with how ggplot wants to work. So if you did want that, you'd have to go back and just, instead of being lazy and typing P2 here, you just have to grab all of this content here, paste it in there, and then switch out the geom smooth. Instead of having geom smooth blank to default, which is LOS, you change that to method equals lm. So let's put that back the way it was now, so that we finish this podcast with it actually looking as we intended. So there we go. So I'll leave you to play around with that. It's up to you, I think, how you want to work. Like I said, I'm becoming a big fan of ggplot. It does mean you need to work ever more carefully with data frames though, and but it comes into its own really when you start having these ever more complex models or complex data frames and numbers of variables that you're working with. So we'll leave it there. With scatter plots, so that's it. 2 methods to produce scatter plots, either with base graphics or with ggplot. The choice is absolutely yours, and I've linked you to. So Hadley Wickham's got a website to support tidyverse. It's really good. There's loads of some links to free courses available there on ggplot. So he's also got this website here, this cookbook for our website. It's got tons of stuff in there. I suggest you take a look at that. I use it all the time to find out how to do ggplot tricks.